The flatbed lights flashed red across my own driveway as a stranger hitched chains to my pickup truck at 6 in the morning. "Mom, step back. This vehicle's been ordered removed by the Homeowners Association," the driver said, not even looking at me. I stood there in my robe, coffee mug shaking in my hand, watching my truck get dragged off my own property like stolen goods. Karen Whitfield, HOA president, watched from her porch across the street, arms crossed, a smug little smile tugging at her lips. That morning, I didn't know it yet, but Karen had just declared war on the wrong resident of Willow Creek Estates. My name is Mia Torres, single, structural engineer, and until that morning, a fairly quiet homeowner who paid dues on time. I bought my house on Larkspur Lane 2 years earlier, a modest 3-bedroom with a driveway just wide enough for my work truck. Karen Whitfield had run the HOA board for 11 years, ruling the neighborhood like her own private kingdom with a laminated rulebook. She'd fine people for grass a half-inch too tall, for wind chimes too loud, for mailbox flags in the wrong color. Most neighbors just paid up and stayed quiet, terrified of the endless fines, and threatening letters stamped with her signature. I'd heard whispers that Karen once got a widow's car towed for parking in her own spot during a beautification inspection. I brushed it off as gossip back then. I had my own life, my daughter Ellie, my job, my sanity to protect. My pickup truck was for work, hauling tools, blueprints, site equipment. IT wasn't a luxury. It was how I fed my kid. I always parked it in my own driveway, nose in, exactly where the original HOA guidelines said commercial vehicles were allowed overnight. That single detail, allowed overnight, would later become the crack that split Karen Whitfield's entire kingdom wide open. 2 months before the tow, Karen mailed me a violation notice. Commercial vehicle visible from street, removed within 48 hours. I called the HOA office, confused. My truck had sat in that same spot for 18 months without a single complaint. 18-foot, I have a 2019 amendment that says no commercial vehicles. Period. Karen told me flatly, refusing to email me a copy. I asked for the amendment in writing 3 separate times. Each time, her assistant said it was being pulled from the archive. Meanwhile, fines kept appearing on my account. $25 a day. Compounding. No hearing scheduled. No explanation offered. I paid the first fine just to keep peace. Bad move. Karen smelled weakness and doubled the pressure within a week. She started sending inspectors, 2 teenage boys she paid in cash, to photograph my driveway every single morning. My neighbor Dale, a retired mechanic, warned me quietly. She did this to the Hendersons. They moved out crying within a year. I laughed it off, telling Dale I wasn't going anywhere. I had nowhere else to go, and I loved my little house. Then, one Tuesday, Ellie came home from the bus stop asking why the mean lady had taken a photo of her too. That was the moment something in me went cold. Find my truck, find my grass, but leave my daughter out of it. I marched straight to the HOA office and demanded the 2019 amendment Karen kept quoting like scripture. In writing, notarized, Karen smiled that thin, practiced smile. I don't owe residents copies of internal documents. MS. Torres. Read your welcome packet. I went home that night and read my welcome packet cover to cover. There was no such amendment listed anywhere in it. The next morning, my truck's tires were slashed. All 4. No camera footage from the community security system. I filed a police report. The officer shrugged, said HOA disputes were civil matters, and left without dusting for prints. Karen sent a sympathy card 2 days later. So sorry to hear about your vehicle troubles. Signed with a smiley face. The audacity of that card told me everything. She wasn't hiding her satisfaction. She was rubbing it in my face. I started keeping a notebook. Dates, times, every fine, every inspection, every conversation with Karen's office. Word for word. My coworker Priya, a paralegal by training, told me over lunch, Karen's playbook always has holes. HOAs love bluffing residents into silence. Ask for the governing documents from the county recorder's office, Priya said. if she filed a fake amendment. It's public record. That weekend I drove to the county clerk's office and requested every recorded HOA document for Willow Creek Estates since incorporation. The clerk handed me a thin folder. There was number 2019 amendment banning commercial vehicles anywhere in the official filings. My hands actually trembled reading that empty gap in the record. Karen Whitfield had been enforcing a rule that legally didn't exist. I photocopied everything, 3 sets, and mailed 1 copy to my own address unopened, an old trick to timestamp evidence. Meanwhile, the fines kept climbing. My account now showed $600 owed for a rule with no legal foundation whatsoever. I sent Karen a certified letter demanding proof of the amendment's recording, citing the exact statute governing HOA rule changes. She didn't reply for 11 days. When she finally did, it was a lien notice threatening to place a claim on my house. Over grass-length nonsense and a truck that had sat legally in my driveway for a year and a half. I couldn't sleep that night. I sat at my kitchen table with Ellie's nightlight glowing down the hall, and I made a decision. If Karen Whitfield wanted a war fought with paperwork, fine. I build structures for a living. I know how foundations crack. The next morning I requested, in writing, every board meeting minute from the past 3 years under the HOA's own bylaws. Under state law, as a dues-paying member, I had the legal right to inspect financial and governance records on demand. Karen's office lost the request twice. The third time, I hand-delivered IT with a witness and a time-stamped photo. She finally handed me a banker's box of minutes, conveniently missing the entire folder from the year the amendment supposedly passed. A missing folder. Of course. I photographed every remaining page anyway, cataloging dates, decisions, votes, and absences from board attendance. One name kept appearing as excused absence during every controversial vote. Treasurer Bob Delgado. Karen's quiet, nervous second-in-command. I found Bob at the community pool, alone, reading a paperback. I sat down and asked him gently what he actually knew. Bob went pale. "I can't talk about board stuff," he whispered, glancing toward Karen's house like she might be listening. "I'm not asking you to talk," I said. "I'm asking if you've ever seen the reserve fund statements line up right." He didn't answer, but he didn't leave either. He just stared at the pool water for a long, uncomfortable minute. 2 days later, an unmarked envelope appeared in my mailbox. Inside, photocopies of HOA bank statements. No signature. The numbers were staggering. Over $40,000 in landscaping consulting fees, paid to a company I'd never heard of. I looked up the company. It was registered 8 months earlier to an address matching Karen Whitfield's own home. My coffee went cold in my hand. This wasn't just a petty power trip about trucks and lawns anymore. This was theft. I called Priya immediately, reading her the company name and address over the phone at 11 at night. "Mia," she said slowly, "that's not a violation issue anymore. That's fraud. You need a real attorney, not just a notebook." The next morning, Karen posted a community-wide notice. Emergency assessment of $300 per household for urgent drainage repairs. Neighbors grumbled but paid. Nobody questioned Karen. Questioning Karen meant becoming her next target. And everyone had seen what happened to me. Except now, I had a shadow ally in Bob, an anonymous envelope, and a folder of missing minutes conveniently absent from the record. I hired an attorney named Grace Alcott, a sharp woman who'd sued 3 other HOAs for exactly this kind of fund misuse. "This is a pattern," Grace said, flipping through my notebook. "Fake amendments, selective enforcement, shell companies." Grace filed a formal records demand under state HOA transparency law, giving the board 30 days to produce complete financials. Karen's response came fast and furious. A hand-delivered notice fining me $2,000 for harassment of board members. Harassment. For asking to see where my own dues were going. The nerve of that woman took my breath away. My tow truck driver from that first morning, a young guy named Julio, texted me out of nowhere. "I need to tell you something." We met at a diner off Route 9. Julio looked nervous, stirring his coffee without drinking it. avoiding my eyes at first. Karen paid me $200 cash to tow your truck without a real work order, he admitted. There was no amendment. She just told me to. I asked if he'd testify to that. He hesitated, then nodded slowly. She's done this to like 4 other people. I felt sick about it. Julio was the tow company owner's nephew. His uncle, it turned out, was married to Karen's sister, a family arrangement hiding in plain sight. Every unauthorized vehicle, tow in Willow Creek Estates for the past 3 years had gone through that same family-connected company. Kickbacks, fake rules, a shell landscaping company. I sat in that diner booth realizing Karen's little kingdom ran on a web of quiet corruption. For a few weeks, things went strangely calm. No new fines, no inspectors, no photos taken of my driveway or my daughter. Karen even waved at me once at the mailbox. Sickly sweet, like nothing had ever happened between us at all. Grace warned me not to relax. Silence from someone like Karen usually means she's regrouping, not surrendering, she said flatly. Then came the twist I never saw coming. Bob Delgado resigned from the board, citing personal health reasons, effective immediately. Before he left, though, Bob mailed Grace's office a sealed envelope containing the original, never-passed draft of the 2019 amendment. It had never gone to a vote. It had never been ratified. Karen had simply typed it up and started enforcing it years later. Worse, the draft had a handwritten note in the margin. Karen's own handwriting. Use if T tries to fight the truck rule again. T. I stared at that initial for a long time before Grace pointed out the obvious. Her prior target's name had been Teresa Henderson, the widow, the one Dale mentioned. Karen had drafted this exact scheme years earlier, shelved it, and simply reused it on me. This wasn't improvisation. This was a rehearsed playbook, refined victim after victim, each time a little more polished and cruel. I felt something shift inside me, not just anger anymore, but a cold, focused clarity. This ends with her. Permanently, Grace filed a lawsuit. Conversion, fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and violation of state HOA transparency statutes. All in one complaint. We requested a jury trial, not small claims. Grace wanted this in front of 12 neighbors who'd lived under Karen's rule too. Karen hired an attorney named Chip Osgood, a smug man who showed up to the first hearing in cowboy boots and sunglasses indoors. This is a simple parking dispute being blown wildly out of proportion, Chip told the judge, barely glancing at our evidence folder. The judge, a no-nonsense woman named Judge Renata Kwan, asked to see the actual recorded amendment Karen had been enforcing. Chip shuffled papers, stalling. We're still locating the original document, he said. Judge Kwan's eyebrows rose exactly 1 centimeter. You have 30 days, she said, or this court will assume no such amendment legally exists. Mr. Osgood. Karen's face, from the gallery, went the color of old drywall. For the first time, I watched her composure genuinely crack. Outside the courthouse, Karen cornered me by the parking meters. You'll regret this, she hissed. I run that neighborhood. Not you. You ran it, I said calmly. Past tense, Karen. I walked to my car without looking back, heart pounding the whole way. That night, someone spray-painted a slur across my garage door. No cameras caught it. The community security system was mysteriously offline again. I cried that night, not from fear, but from sheer exhaustion. Then I photographed the damage and added it to Grace's file. A neighbor named Raina, who'd never spoken to me before, knocked on my door the next morning holding her phone out nervously. I've been recording Karen's board meetings for 8 months, Raina admitted. I never knew what to do with it. Would this help? 8 months of secret audio. Karen bullying residents, mocking Teresa Henderson by name, joking about how easy it is to scare people. One clip stopped my heart cold, Karen laughing. The trick is, nobody ever actually checks the recorder's office. They just believe me. I handed Raina's recording straight to Grace. She said this single piece of audio could reshape the entire case in our favor. Karen, sensing the ground shifting, tried a new move. she filed a restraining order against me, claiming I'd threatened her safety. The claim was absurd. One vague text where I'd written "This isn't over" after the spray painting incident on my garage. At the restraining order hearing, Karen sobbed dramatically on the stand, dabbing her eyes with a tissue pulled theatrically from her purse. Then Grace played Raina's audio clip of Karen mocking Teresa Henderson, laughing about how easy residents were to manipulate. The courtroom went dead silent. Even Chip Osgood shifted in his seat, suddenly very interested in his own shoelaces. The judge denied Karen's restraining order outright and, worse for Karen, noted the audio for consideration in related civil proceedings. Karen stormed out of that courthouse so fast her heel caught the door frame. And for once, nobody in the hallway laughed with her. Word started spreading through Willow Creek. Neighbors who'd been silently fined for years began reaching out to me. One by one, the Ochoas, the Petersons, a young couple named the Franklins who'd been fined for a wrong shade of front door paint. Then came twist after twist. The Franklins revealed Karen's landscaping shell company had billed the HOA for work never actually performed. Grace hired a forensic accountant named Priyanka Rao to trace every payment from the HOA account to Karen's shell company. Priyanka found $61,000 funneled out over 3 years, disguised across dozens of small invoices to avoid audit thresholds. Every invoice was just under the $5,000 limit that would have triggered a mandatory independent financial review under state law. Karen hadn't just broken rules. She'd engineered every theft specifically to dodge the exact safeguards meant to catch someone like her. Priyanka also found a curious detail. Karen's home mortgage had been refinanced twice in the last 3 years, oddly matching payout dates. Public records showed a new in-ground pool permit pulled at Karen's address, filed 2 weeks after a drainage emergency assessment. The neighborhood had paid $300 a household for urgent drainage repairs that apparently financed Karen Whitfield's backyard swimming pool. I felt something between rage and disbelief reading that. She'd taxed an entire community's fear to build herself a personal oasis. Grace amended our lawsuit to include the entire homeowners association as CO plaintiffs, turning my personal fight into a class action. 63 households joined within a week. Karen's mailbox, ironically, started filling with the exact kind of violation notices she used to send. Chip Osgood quietly withdrew as Karen's attorney, citing irreconcilable differences. 2 days after Priyanka's forensic report was formally filed, Karen, without a lawyer, tried representing herself, showing up to a PRE trial hearing with a binder labeled character witnesses. Her first witness was her own sister, the tow company owner's wife, who nearly admitted the kickback scheme under gentle questioning. "I never took cash directly," the sister stammered, before catching herself. "I mean, there was no kickback scheme at all." Judge Kwan noted the contradiction on record. Karen's face, watching from the plaintiff table, looked like she wanted the floor to swallow her. That night, Ellie asked me why the mean lady's house had police cars outside it. I hadn't even heard the news yet. Karen had reported a break-in attempt at her home, though neighbors said they'd only seen a process server delivering subpoenas. Karen accused me, specifically, of orchestrating a harassment campaign, using unnamed criminal associates to intimidate her into dropping the case. It was almost funny how quickly the woman who'd bullied a neighborhood for 11 years now cast herself as the victim. Grace calmly submitted the actual subpoena paperwork, time-stamped, delivered by a licensed process server with photo identification and body camera footage. The break-in story collapsed within a day. But Karen wasn't done. She had one more card left to play against me directly. She filed a defamation countersuit against me personally, claiming my public statements had damaged her reputation and cost her landscaping consulting income. Consulting income from the shell company, funded by fraudulent HOA invoices. The audacity almost made me laugh out loud in Grace's office. Grace grinned reading the countersuit. She just admitted, in a legal filing, that the shell company income was real and ongoing. We now had it in writing, from Karen's own attorney-drafted complaint, confirming the very fraud we were trying to prove existed. Meanwhile, the county tax assessor's office flagged Karen's new pool permit for a required inspection, unrelated to our lawsuit entirely. The inspector found the pool built 4 feet closer to the property line than code allowed, requiring a costly retroactive variance. Karen requested an emergency HOA vote to approve her own variance, using her position as board president to fast-track the approval. Raina recorded that meeting too, Karen voting for her own variance, overriding 2 board members who raised obvious conflict of interest concerns. That recording went straight into evidence. Grace called it a gift, the kind of arrogant overreach juries remember during deliberation. Karen, desperate now, tried offering me a private settlement, dropped the lawsuit, and she'd personally waive all my remaining fines. I almost laughed reading the offer letter. She was offering to forgive debts that had never legally existed in the first place. Grace and I declined in writing, formally, on the record, closing off any argument that I'd been offered reasonable resolution and refused it. Discovery continued for another 6 weeks. Priyanka's forensic report grew to 82 pages, documenting every fraudulent transaction with painstaking precision. Then came the twist that finally sealed things. The shell company's registered agent turned out to be Karen's own daughter. Brooke, 19, a college sophomore, had unknowingly signed incorporation paperwork her mother mailed her to help with a school project. When investigators contacted Brooke directly, the girl broke down crying, horrified to learn her name had laundered her mother's stolen money. Brooke agreed to testify against her own mother, providing texts where Karen instructed her exactly what to sign and never question. I actually felt a pang of sympathy watching that unfold. A daughter dragged into her mother's greed without ever understanding the stakes. Karen, cornered, went on local news claiming the entire lawsuit was a coordinated smear campaign by disgruntled troublemaker residents. The reporter, to Karen's visible shock, then read aloud 3 direct quotes from Raina's leaked board meeting recordings on live television. Karen's community approval, already crumbling, evaporated entirely overnight. Her own front lawn got egged twice within the same week. The trial date finally arrived. 63 plaintiffs, 1 forensic accountant, 1 former treasurer, 1 tow driver, and 1 heartbroken daughter, all set to testify. I sat in the front row of the gallery, notebook in hand, 3 years of documentation finally about to matter in a courtroom. Karen arrived in a sharp navy blazer, hair perfectly set, looking every bit the composed community leader she'd spent years pretending to be. Her new attorney, a young public defender assigned last minute, looked visibly overwhelmed flipping through Priyanka's 82-page forensic report. Grace opened simply. This case is about a woman who turned a rulebook into a weapon and a community into her personal bank account. Bob Delgado testified first, voice shaking, describing years of silently watching Karen approve payments to her own address without objection. "Why didn't you speak up sooner?" Grace asked gently. "I was scared," Bob admitted. "She threatened to find my elderly mother's house." Julio testified next, confirming the cash for tow arrangement, the family connection, and the complete absence of any legitimate work order. Raina's audio recordings played for the jury in full. Karen's own voice mocking Teresa Henderson, laughing about scaring residents into silence. Several jurors visibly recoiled hearing that laugh. One older juror actually shook her head slowly, eyes fixed on Karen the entire time. Priyanka walked the jury through $61,000 in disguised payments, spreadsheet by spreadsheet, invoice by suspiciously sub-threshold invoice. Brooke testified last before the recess, tearfully describing the texts where her own mother instructed her to sign incorporation papers blindly. During cross-examination, Karen's young attorney tried suggesting Brooke had misunderstood ordinary business paperwork out of youthful confusion. Brooke pulled out her phone and read her mother's exact text aloud. "Just sign it. Don't read it. I'll explain later." The courtroom went silent again. Even the judge paused before instructing the clerk to log the exhibit number for that message. Then it was my turn on the stand. Grace walked me through the tow, the fines, the fake amendment, the spray-painted garage door. Chip's replacement attorney tried one last angle. "Isn't it true you simply refused to follow reasonable community parking guidelines?" I calmly held up the county clerk's certified letter. There was no guideline. There was never a recorded amendment. Just her word. The jury foreman, an engineer like me, actually nodded slightly at that answer, and I felt something loosen in my chest. Karen took the stand in her own defense, insisting every fine had been fair, documented, and in the community's best interest. Grace asked her directly, "Did you personally draft the 2019 amendment you enforced against Ms. Torres?" Karen hesitated far too long. "I consulted the bylaws," Karen said carefully. Grace produced Bob's sealed envelope, the original draft. Karen's own handwriting in the margin. "Use if T tries to fight the truck rule again," Grace read aloud. "Who is T? Ms. Whitfield." Karen's composure finally shattered. "Teresa Henderson," Karen admitted quietly, before catching herself. "But that doesn't mean, the rule was still valid. You just admitted, under oath, that you wrote and reused a fake amendment you knew was never legally passed," Grace said. Karen's face went blank, the calculating mask she'd worn for 11 years finally slipping in front of the entire jury box. On redirect, the defense tried salvaging things, asking Karen to explain the pool permit and drainage assessment funds separately. Karen claimed the drainage assessment was coincidentally spent before pool construction began, insisting the timing meant absolutely nothing at all. Priyanka was recalled to the stand, showing the exact dates. Assessment collected March 3rd. Pool contractor deposit paid March 5th. 2 days. That was the gap between taxing frightened neighbors and funding her own backyard oasis. The jury's expressions hardened visibly. Closing arguments began the next morning. Grace kept it simple. She didn't enforce rules. She invented them, then profited from the fear. The defense argued Karen was simply a strict but well-meaning volunteer who'd made administrative errors under significant community pressure. Nobody in that jury box looked convinced. Even the bailiff, standing near the door, seemed to be suppressing a small skeptical smile. Deliberation took 4 hours. I sat in the hallway with Ellie's photo on my phone screen, willing the wait to end faster. When the jury filed back in, the foreman didn't smile, didn't frown, just held the verdict sheet with steady, professional hands. On the count of conversion regarding the plaintiff's vehicle, we find for the plaintiff, Ms. Torres, awarding actual and punitive damages. On the count of fraud regarding the falsified amendment, we find for the plaintiffs, awarding punitive damages against defendant Whitfield personally. On the count of breach of fiduciary duty, we find for the plaintiffs, the Homeowners Association, in the full amount requested. The total came to $412,000, split across restitution, punitive damages, and full attorney's fee reimbursement. Karen sat frozen at the defense table, staring at nothing, while her new attorney quietly gathered papers into his briefcase. Judge Kwan wasn't finished. Given the pattern of fraud demonstrated here, I'm referring this case to the district attorney's office. Grand theft, fraud, and embezzlement charges followed within 3 weeks, filed criminally against Karen Whitfield in state court. The tow, it turned out, met the legal threshold for grand theft auto given my truck's assessed commercial value and improper seizure. I sat in the gallery watching Karen finally truly understand that this was no longer a civil dispute about a parking spot. Reporters swarmed the courthouse steps. Karen pushed through the cameras, refusing comment, her navy blazer suddenly looking a size too big. The Homeowners Association's remaining board members called an emergency meeting and voted unanimously to remove Karen from the presidency, effective immediately. Under the association's own bylaws, the real ones, filed correctly, a felony fraud conviction automatically disqualified any board member. Karen's house went up for sale within a month. A motivated seller listing that neighbors quietly joked practically wrote itself. Brooke, the daughter, moved in with her aunt, distancing herself entirely from her mother while the criminal case proceeded slowly. I felt for Brooke. Honestly, she'd been used as a tool in her own mother's scheme, and now she was rebuilding alone. Bob Delgado, despite his silence, avoided charges by cooperating fully, though the association quietly asked him not to seek re-election either. Julio's uncle's tow company lost its county contract entirely once the kickback arrangement became public record during criminal discovery. Chip Osgood, Karen's original attorney, faced a state bar inquiry for failing to disclose known conflicts during the civil proceedings. The real twist nobody expected: the urgent drainage repairs Karen once charged U.S. for actually needed doing, badly, dangerously so. An engineer inspection, ordered as part of the settlement, found genuine erosion threatening 2 homes' foundations near the retention pond. Karen had known about the real drainage problem, ignored it, and used the fabricated urgency purely to fund her personal pool instead. That detail turned my stomach more than anything else. She'd gambled with actual structural safety just to build herself a backyard oasis. The settlement fund, once distributed, included a mandated repair budget for the drainage issue, finally fixed under independent professional oversight. I used part of my award to replace my trucks/tires, repaint my garage door, and quietly upgrade Ellie's bedroom window locks. Raina and I became genuine friends, meeting for coffee weekly, still slightly amazed at how far one recording had traveled U.S. Teresa Henderson, the original widow Karen had targeted years earlier, reached out with a card. "Thank you for finishing what I couldn't." I framed that card. It sits on my kitchen counter next to Ellie's school photos, a small reminder of why this mattered. The new HOA board, elected the following spring, included Dale, my retired mechanic neighbor, running specifically on a transparency platform. Their first act: publishing every financial record online, monthly, for any resident to review without needing a formal written request. Karen's criminal trial concluded 8 months later. Guilty on grand theft, guilty on fraud, guilty on embezzlement of association funds. The judge sentenced her to 18 months in county custody, 5 years probation, and full restitution beyond the civil settlement already paid. Karen wept in the courtroom. Finally, genuinely, no theatrical tissue this time. Just a woman watching her carefully built empire dissolve entirely. I didn't feel joy watching that. I felt something quieter, heavier, relief that the fear she'd spread finally had consequences. Outside the courthouse, a reporter asked if I had anything to say to Karen Whitfield directly. Camera pointed right at me. "I hope she gets help," I said honestly. "But I also hope nobody in that neighborhood ever feels that scared again." Life on Larkspur Lane slowly softened. Neighbors who'd avoided each other for years started hosting a monthly potluck by the pool. My truck sat proudly in my driveway every night, exactly where it always legally belonged. Nobody photographing it anymore. Nobody tratando fines. Ellie asked me once if the mean lady was gone for good. For a long time, I told her honestly. A very long time. Bob Delgado sent me a handwritten apology letter months later, admitting his silence had let Karen's scheme run far longer than it should have. I forgave him, mostly. Fear does strange things to good people, and he'd ultimately helped hand us the evidence that broke everything open. Brooke graduated college the following year. She sent Raina a message once. "Thank you for not letting my mother win at my expense." The drainage repair finished on schedule, funded properly, overseen honestly. The 2 threatened homes finally safe after years of quiet danger. Willow Creek Estates never fully forgot Karen Whitfield, but slowly, deliberately, it stopped being defined by her, one honest meeting at a time. I still keep my old notebook in a drawer. 3 years of dates and fines and fear. Now just a strange, sturdy relic. Some nights I read through it, amazed at how close I came to just paying quietly, staying small, letting her win by default. Winning cost me something too: months of sleepless nights, a slashed set of tires, a daughter who grew up faster than she should have. But my truck sits in my driveway. My daughter sleeps safely, and Karen Whitfield's name is now just a cautionary story neighbors tell at potlucks. Some battles cost you pieces of yourself to win, but some battles you simply cannot afford to lose.